In this video, we'll be talking about one of the most powerful productivity techniques out there, timeboxing, and we're using Notion to make it super easy to implement into your daily life. Harvard Business Review actually ranked timeboxing as one of the best productivity methods, and it's used by people like Elon Musk to stay focused and manage their time effectively. It's a simple yet effective method where you allocate fixed time slots for specific tasks, helping you stay on track and avoid distractions. Today, I'll walk you through creating a custom timeboxing template in Notion step by step. By the end of this video, you'll have a fully functional system to structure your day, boost your productivity, and actually get things done. Let's get started. So first off, I'm just going to give you a little tour of the template that I've created, and then in the rest of the video, I'll be showing you how to build it completely from scratch. So this is the timeboxing to-do list, as you can see, and there are 3 tabs on here. We have the to-do tab, in progress, and complete. So this is a way for you to organize your tasks between the ones that are outstanding, the ones you're doing, and the ones that have been completed. So we're currently on the to-do tab, so these are the tasks that you haven't started yet, and as you can see, here is the name of the task. It will show you the due date. There's a button here to start the task. This is your time allocation. So this is the timeboxing principle where you allocate the time that you need for this task, and it helps you keep on track and actually get the task done because you have a time limit to work towards. And then we have a status property as well. So the way that it works, once you're starting the task, you'll click the start task button and it will disappear from the to-do tab, and it will then move over to this tab, which is the in progress tab. And as you can see, here are the tasks that are currently in progress. Now on this tab, we have an end task button rather than the start task button that's on this tab, and that's because once you finish the task, you can click end task. So for example, let's click end task. It will then disappear and it will now move to the complete tab. And as you can see on this tab, it will then show all of the tasks that you've completed. It will show how much time was allocated for that task. And then it has this formula which I've set up, which either shows that you completed the task on time, so within the allocated time, or if you do exceed the time that was allocated, it will actually tell you by how many minutes you exceeded the time limit. So again, this is another way for you to keep your eye on how much time you're spending on tasks. It tells you if you've spent extra time, so then you can start understanding where you're losing time, where you're being slow, to hopefully speed up and become more productive. So that is how this timeboxing template works, and in the rest of the video I'll be showing you step by step how to build this entire system. So I've just set up a brand new page for this build. I've labeled it timeboxing to-do list, and I've just picked an emoji and a cover photo, and that's all we've done so far. So the first thing we actually want to do here is we need to create a brand new database to use as our to-do list. So I'm just going to type /database and select database in line to add a new database. And we're going to just click new empty database to get started with a blank database. Now you can give this any name you want. I'm just going to call it timeboxing. And we're actually going to hide the title of the database because I've already written a title here. So I'm just going to click on here and just hide the database title. So let's start by just adding a few example tasks into the database. So we're going to use this first column here. So I'm just going to click on here and add a few tasks in as an example. Now, the next step is optional, but I'm actually going to add an icon for all of our tasks as well. So I'm going to use the same icon for every task to keep it simple. And to do that, I'm just going to click on this box here just to select all of the pages. And then I'm going to click on these little 6 dots here next to it. And we're going to click edit icon. So you can pick from the emoji library, or you can use one of Notion's icons. I think in this case, we're going to go with this checkmark circle, which looks like this. I think that just makes it look a little bit nicer. Now, I actually don't want to have to add this icon every time I add a new task. So we can actually add this icon as default. And to do that, you want to set up a default template. So you want to click on this little arrow here, select new template. And on the template, the only thing we're going to do right now is just add the icon. So I'm going to click add icon, head over to the icon library and just click that exact same circle. You can then just click off the page like this to go back to the main page. There's one other thing we need to do with that, and that's to set it as default. And to do that, you want to click on the downward arrow. You'll see the template here with the little icon. So we're going to click on the 3 dots next to it and just set it as default. And you also want to select for all views in timeboxing. So this just means whenever you add something new like this, once I hit enter, it's going to add that icon for us by default. So it just saves us time in future. Just before we jump back to the tutorial, I want to let you know about my second brain template. This powerful productivity system is the best way to organize your tasks, notes, projects, and goals, and is based on productivity methods that actually work. Hundreds of people have already purchased the template and are now more productive than ever. It also has tons of 5-star reviews from people that have used it. I'll leave a link in the description box below if you're interested. That's all, back to the tutorial. So next I actually want to add a status property so I can see the status of each of the tasks. So I'm going to click on this plus symbol here, just type in status, and we're going to select the status property. So this is a ready-made property that Notion has created. So it already has not started, in progress, and done already as options within the property. So I'm just going to add it and leave it as it is. Next, I also want a due date property so I can set a date for each of the tasks. So we're going to click on the plus symbol again, type in date, and let's just add a date property, and we can just leave it as it is. For now, I'm just going to select today's date for all of these. If you actually just drag it like this, it will populate the same thing in all of them. Obviously, you can pick the actual due dates for each task, but just as an example, I'm just going to use today's date. Next, we're going to start adding the time boxing principles. So the first thing we want to do is be able to set a time allocation for each task. So essentially, you're just going to say how long it should take you to complete the task. So we're going to click on the plus symbol, and this one's actually going to be a number property. So I'm going to type in number and select this one, and let's just name this property time. Okay, I'll just make that a little bit smaller. So in here, we're going to input the number of minutes that each task should take. So let's just say that your daily meeting is an hour. So I'm going to put 60 minutes for that one. Let's say writing this report normally takes you 2 hours. So let's put 2 hours or 120 minutes here as the time allocation. So ideally, you want to make sure that you're getting these tasks done in a good amount of time. You don't want to be spending more time than you need to. So you want to put a reasonable target, enough time to actually complete the task, but also not so much time that you're just wasting time. So let's say editing the video might take you a bit longer, and so on. So next, we want to add some properties that actually help us measure if we got this task completed within the allocated time limit. So we're going to add 2 properties, one where you can log your start time for the task and one where you can log the finish time. So we're going to click again on this plus symbol and type in date and select the date property. And I'm actually just going to rename this one start time. And you can leave the settings as they are. We then need one for end time, so I'm just going to add another one. Again, type in date, and this one we're just going to name end time. Next, to save you a little bit of time, I don't want to have to manually add the start time in these boxes every single time that I start or finish a task. It would be nice if Notion would actually just do that for me. So we can do that using buttons. So we're going to add a button called start time. You click the button and it's going to populate this box here with the time that you started that task. So to do that, we're going to click on the plus symbol here, and I'm just going to type in button, and you want to select this button option, and let's just call this one start task. Now, the name of the property here is going to be the word that actually displays on this button. So I want the button to say start task, which is why we're naming it that. Then we just need to edit the automation, which just means we're going to edit what the button does when we click on it. So I'm going to click on edit automation, and you'll get this little menu here. So it says when the button is clicked, and then here we can add the actions that we want to occur when we click the button. So I'll click on new action. And what we actually want is we want to edit one of the properties. We want to edit the start time property. So I'm going to click on here. It's going to bring up all the properties in our database. So we want to edit that start time property, and we want to set it to the time triggered. Now you want to pick time triggered rather than date triggered, because date is just going to input the date. So if I clicked it right now, it would just put in today's date. Whereas if you select time triggered, it will input today's date and the exact time that you clicked that button, which is really important for this database because you're pretty much always going to be clicking it on the same day. So we just want to see how much time it took. So we're going to use time triggered. I actually also want to change one more thing when we click on this button. So I'm going to click edit property, and I also think it would be useful for it to automatically change the status property to in progress for us as well. So I'm just setting that in here as well. So you click the start task button, it adds the time triggered into the start time property, and it changes our status to in progress. So let's click save. So this is what the button looks like. Obviously we'll make this database look a lot nicer later, but for now this is what it looks like. So if I click start task, as you can see, it's inputted the date and the exact time that I clicked this button into this box, and it's changed the status here for this task to in progress. So now we're going to do the exact same thing, but we want an end task button that is going to fill out the end time for us. And then we can see the difference between the 2 times to work out how long the task took us. And then we can compare that to the time allocation. We're going to use a lot of formulas to do that later, so don't worry too much about that now. So let's start by adding our end task button. So I'm going to click on here to add another property, and it's going to be another button. And this one, let's just name end task. And remember, whatever you write here as the name, that is going to be what is displayed on the button. we want to edit the automation. Again, it's going to say when the button is clicked, what do we want to do? So I'm going to click new action. And again, we're going to edit a property. This time it's going to be the end time property. And we also want to set that to the time triggered. Again, I want to change the status as well. So if we edit another property, this time, again, it's the status, but we're going to set it this time to done so that it changes the task to being complete. So that's all this button is going to do. So I'm just going to click save. So now when I click end task, as you can see, it fills out this property for us. And as you can see, it took me 1 minute to set up the end task button. So it's definitely working correctly. So the next thing we want to do is add a formula that is going to firstly work out the time difference between these two properties and then compares it to the time allocation. And then it'll either tell us that we've completed the task within our time limit or we've exceeded the limit. And I'd like it to tell us how many minutes over we were. So I showed you that at the beginning. So that's the formula we're going to set up. So we're going to start by adding a new property by clicking the plus symbol, and it's going to be a formula property. So I'm going to type in formula and select this one. Now I'm actually going to call this our task completion status, but you can kind of call it what you want. And then I'm going to click edit formula to bring up our panel here, which is where we're actually going to write our formula. So as I said, the first thing we want to do is work out the time difference between our start and end time. So what we can do is actually use the date between function, which primarily is used to work out the time between two dates, but it can also work out the difference in actual time. So you can set it to work out the minutes, for example, between these two times. So to use it, we're just going to start typing date between, and you should see it pop up here in the sidebar. So I'm just going to click that to add it in. Now, the first thing that you need to tell this function is the two dates which you want to work out the time between. So those two dates are simply going to be our start time and our end time properties. So if you look again here in the sidebar, you'll see all of the properties within the table. So we're going to start by adding the end time property, a comma, and then the start time. So that's essentially just telling it, I want you to work out the date between, or the time difference between, our end time property and our start time property. I'm going to add another comma, and the final thing that you need to tell this function is the unit. So do we want to work out the difference between them in days, in months, years, or in our case, we actually want to work out minutes. You can also set it to hours, but I think minutes makes more sense because a lot of our tasks are going to be less than an hour. So I think it makes more sense to do it in minutes. So I'm going to put 2 quotation marks like this and just type the word minutes in between. You can read a little bit more about this function here, and it shows you all of the different units that you can use. So we're going to use this one, minutes. So at this point, I'm just going to click save for a second so you can see that this works. And as you can see in the property here, it says 1, and that is correct. There is only 1 minute difference between these two times. So it is working correctly. So let me just click back on here into the editor. So we are going to reference this number a little bit throughout the formula. So I actually want to turn it into a variable. And what that means is we're literally just going to give this piece of code here a code name or a phrase that I can reference throughout the rest of the text. And the formula will know that I mean this entire thing here. So I don't have to type it out every time. So to do that, what we're going to do is place your cursor here right at the start. And I'm going to write the word let and open a parentheses. And now I need to write in my little code phrase. So let's just call this time taken. So I'm going to write the words time taken like this and a comma. So this little phrase time taken means this. So every time I write time taken, I'm essentially just telling the formula to grab this long bit of code here and pull that into the formula. It just saves us a little bit of time. And I'm also just going to add a comma here right at the end. Now I actually want to go to the next line within our formula. It just keeps the code a little bit neater and makes it easier to understand. So if you want to go to the next line, you can hold down shift on your keyboard and just hit enter, and you're going to go to the next line. Now next, what I want to do is I want to display something different in our formula output depending on if we've completed it within the time limit or if we've exceeded the time limit. So to check that, we're actually going to use an if statement so that we can check if the different conditions have been met. So I'm going to type the word if and open a parentheses. Now, firstly, I want to check if the time taken is less than our time allocation. So if it's less, that means that we've completed it within the time frame. So let's start by adding a condition in here to check. So I'm just going to write the time taken, our little code phrase, and I want to check if that's less than or equal to, this is the symbol for that, our time property. So I want to check, is the time that we took less than or equal to our time allocation property? And if it is, I'm going to put a comma, and then I'm going to add 2 quotation marks, and inside we can write what we want to be displayed. So I'm just going to type in task completed on time. Put an exclamation mark, and let's maybe also add a little emoji in here as well. Let's go with this celebration emoji. So if this condition is true, if the time taken is less than the time allocation, it's going to display this message, task completed on time. I actually think this would be nice if it was green as well. So at the end, you can actually add the dot style function, which looks like this, open and close parentheses, and inside I'm going to put a B like this inside 2 quotation marks, which is going to bold the text, a comma, and then 2 more quotation marks, and I'm just going to write green inside, and that indicates that I want this to be a green color. I'm going to add a comma, and we're going to do shift and enter again to go to the next line. Now, if this statement isn't true, therefore the time taken is more than the time allocation, that means that we've exceeded our time limit. So I want to display something different. So that's what we're going to write here. We need to write our otherwise scenario. So if this isn't true, what do we want the formula to display? So inside 2 quotation marks like this, we're going to write the text that we want to display. So I'm going to say time limit exceeded by, and I'm going to add a space, and then I want this to be followed by the number of minutes that were exceeded, that were outside of the time limit. So let's just put a plus symbol, and we're actually just going to work that out, do a little calculation within the formula. So let's put 2 parentheses to keep the calculation within it, and we're simply just going to do our time taken variable. So I'm just going to write our little code phrase, and we want to minus the time allocation. So this number will be bigger than this number because we've exceeded the time limit. So if we do the time taken minus our time allocation, it will give us how many minutes over we went. So we can actually do that calculation inside our formula, and that's going to display the number here. I want another plus symbol, and then we need to put a little bit more text. So I'm going to do 2 quotation marks, a space, and the word minutes. So basically it's going to say time limit exceeded by, it'll display the number here, so let's say 2, and then it'll say minutes. So time limit exceeded by 2 minutes. Make sure you're adding these little spaces in to ensure there's a space between the word and the number. So I've added 1 here, and I've also added 1 here before minutes. Now in this case, I want this text to be red. So we're going to firstly group this entire thing here together so I can add some styling to it. So to do that, I'm just going to add a parentheses right at the end and 1 here at the start of this section. And then after this parentheses, I can add our dot style function to add styling to the text. Don't forget to add these 2 parentheses. And inside, we're going to do 2 quotation marks with a B, and that bolds the text, a comma, and then 2 more quotation marks. And this time I'm just going to say red, and that's going to make sure the text is red. So the final thing I need to do here is I need to close off our if statement and our let function. So I'm simply just going to add 2 parentheses right at the end to close both of these off. And let's just click save. So as you can see on the top one, this is the one that we filled out. It says task completed on time because I'd allocated 60 minutes and it took me 1 minute. So I did complete it on time. Now the issue with the formula that we're going to fix is that for any of the tasks that you haven't started yet, the time taken is essentially empty, but it does say that you've exceeded the time limit. So we actually want to fix this so that it just displays nothing rather than displaying this because we've not started the task. So I'm just going to click on here, and we need to add one more option inside our if statement. We need to give it an option if the time taken is actually empty. There isn't a time taken because we've not got any data in our start and end times. So what we're going to do is I'm going to place my cursor here, and I'm going to do shift and enter to add another line here. And I actually want to say if the time taken is empty, then let's display something else. So I'm going to add empty like this, and I'm going to open a parentheses, and I'm going to write in our time taken property, which is this little bit here. So it pulls through this, and close the parentheses. So what we're saying is if time taken is empty, i.e. there's nothing, there's no data there, comma, what do we want it to display? So in this case, I actually think it would be best if it just displayed nothing. It doesn't need to display anything because this task isn't started. So I'm just going to put 2 quotation marks like that. So essentially it's going to display whatever is inside these quotation marks, which in this case is absolutely nothing. So it displays nothing. You just need to add a comma here afterwards. And the final thing I need to change is that we currently have this if statement, but with this if function, you're only allowed to write 1 statement. And I've written 2. I've written this statement and then I've written this one. So to add multiple statements, you actually need to write ifs like this. So just add an S here once we've got multiple statements. And that is our formula. So I'm going to click save. And as you can see, it just removes it for the ones that we haven't started. But if this one was actually took me a lot longer, so let's just change this one to 5:07 as an example. As you can see, it now says that the time limit was exceeded by 61 minutes. So it is working correctly. So that formula is now complete. There are a couple of other things that I want to add before we actually make this look a lot nicer. So the first one is I actually want a property that is going to show our time allocation but display the word minutes allocated afterwards. So that's quite a simple formula. So let's just add another property, and it's going to be a formula property, and I'm just going to call it time allocation. And then we're going to click edit formula to bring up our panel, and this one's quite simple. We're firstly just going to pull through the time property. So that was this property over here where you just input the time that it will take to complete the task. So we're going to pull that number through, add a plus symbol, and inside 2 quotation marks we're simply just going to write a space and then the words minutes allocated. So don't forget to add the space so that there is a space between the number and the text. And I'm just going to group this whole thing together so we can add a tiny bit of styling. So I'm going to add 1 parentheses at the end and then just 1 more here at the start. And then we're just going to add that dot style function. And inside the parentheses, firstly, let's make it bold. So you just want a B inside the quotation marks, a comma, 2 more quotation marks, and let's make this text purple. So I'm just going to write purple. So if I click save, as you can see, this property is simply pulling through the time allocation property, and it just says minutes allocated. So this property will just look a little bit nicer on the finished to-do list compared to this property that is just essentially a floating number. I think this looks a little bit better. And the final property that I want to add before we change how this looks is a property that shows when you started the task. So after you've clicked the start task button, so this task then changes to in progress. So I'd love a property that will tell you what time you started this task. So what we're going to do is add 1 more property. So I'm going to click on here, add a formula, and let's call this one started time, and click edit formula. So let's start with a little bit of text that will display at the start. So inside 2 quotation marks we can write the text that we want to be displayed. So I'm just going to say started at, and then a space so that there's a space between the words and the time. We're going to add a plus symbol, and then what I want it to do is actually pull through the time from our start time property. Now in the start time property it also includes the date. So let me just go back on here. So this is the start time property, so it shows the date and the time, but in this formula that I'm creating I just want to pull through the time because most of the time it's going to be the same day that you're completing these tasks. So let's just go back into the formula. So we can actually just pull through the start time property but just format part of the property. So we just want to format the time and not the full date, and we can actually use a function called format date. So I'm just going to start typing that and you'll see it appear here. So this one, format date. So the first thing that we need to do is tell it which date property we want to format. So we want to pull through our start time property, which is actually a date property, but it includes time. So I'm going to click on start time to add it into this function. Then I'm going to type a comma, and the second thing that you need to tell this function is the format that you want it to pull through the date. Now if you have a look here, there are tons of different formats, and you'll actually notice that you can format the time. So this is one of the ways you can format time. So if you write this little piece here, it will format it like this. You can add in time zones, you can format dates as well, but we actually just want the time. So I'm actually going to copy this little bit here and make sure you include the quotation marks and just paste it in here. So that's the format that I want, and you'll see here it's giving me a little overview of what that will look like. So it's saying started at 3:06 p.m, which is perfect. That's exactly how I want it to display. So I'm just going to click save, and as you can see, this is how it looks. So we now have everything we need to make this to-do list work. So now what we need to do is just make it look a little bit nicer and make it a bit more easy to use. So the first thing I want to do is switch it from this table view to a gallery view. So to do that, you want to click on the 3 dots here, select layout, and we're going to switch to a gallery, which looks like this. Now I don't want all this blank space here. It's added a cover photo as default, so I'm just going to click on card preview and just set it to none to get rid of all that space. And we're also going to set up 3 different tabs, one for tasks that are still to do, one for in progress tasks, and one for complete tasks. So this one can be our to do tab, so I'm going to click on here to rename it, and let's just call it to do like this. And you can pick a different icon if you want, so I'm going to click on here and let's go with an empty square to show that it is an outstanding task. Maybe I'll just make that a capital as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a filter so that we can only see tasks that are still to do, that haven't been started. So we're going to click on the filter, and we want to filter by status, and I only want to see tasks where the status is to do or not started. So these are the tasks where the status is not started. Now let's set up the other tab. So I'm going to click on here and duplicate this view, but this one can be renamed as in progress. Let's change the icon as well to this half-filled square. And I'm just going to change the filter here. So we're going to change this filter uncheck to do and change it to in progress and save that one. So there's just one here that's in progress. Once again, just duplicate that tab, and this one just can be called done. And let's change it to this checked square. And finally, just make sure we change the status here, unselect that one and change it to done. So we only get tasks that have been completed. I also just want to add a sort. So for this one on the to-do tab, we're going to add a sort based on the dates. And we're going to set the date, so this is the due date property, and we're going to set it to ascending. So this sort is just going to ensure that the tasks that are showing at the top of the list are the current date, and any for future dates are further down in the list. And for done, we're also going to add a sort, but this time we're going to set the date to descending. So this will just ensure that the task that you completed most recently will display at the top of the list. So next, I just want to show a few of those properties that we set up earlier on our card. So on our to-do tab, we're going to add some of the properties to these cards. So to do that, click on the three dots and select properties. So here are all of those properties that we've set up. So the ones that I want to see firstly are the date, so we can see which date this task is due on. Let's add the start task button so I can easily start the task directly from this tab. I also want to see our time allocation property. So this is the formula that we set up. So when I add that one on here, as you can see, it shows that 10 minutes allocated and so on. So this one is quite easy to understand. And finally, let's also add the status. So just make sure you click on this little symbol here, and that adds it onto the card so I can see the current status. So I think I'm happy with these properties appearing on the to-do tab. Now let's work on the in progress tab. So I actually want different things to appear on the card for this tab. So again, click on the three dots and select properties. Let's start with the date again, so I can just check that it's due today. This time we actually want the end task button rather than the start task button, because these are tasks that have been started. So we're going to show the end task button. Let's also show the status so that I can see that it's in progress. And let's also show this started time formula that we set up. So if I show that, as you can see, it's showing me what time I started this in progress task. So it's an easy way for me to keep track of, am I actually on track with this task? If you want, you can also show the time allocation property, which would be this one. So it's up to you. You can also rearrange them just by dragging them around. Finally, for the done tab, let's click on the three dots, select properties, and this time we're going to show the date again so we can see when this task was completed. We want to see the time allocation so I can see how much was actually allocated for the task, and then the task completion status so I can see, did I complete this task on time or did I exceed the time limit? So in this case, we exceeded it by over an hour. So this will help you really keep track of where you're losing time, which tasks are taking you longer than they should. And that is the setup complete. So you can add tasks just by clicking here on new page, or you can click this new button here. So you'll click on there and it will allow you to add a new task. You can rearrange the properties on here a bit. So the ones you want to fill out are going to be the date, and you also want to fill out this time property. So you can put those to the top. You can also put the status property here. And if you want, you can actually hide all of these other properties on this view. So if you click on here, you can set the property visibility to always hide. And it just cleans this view up a little bit. So I just set all of the properties that we don't need to see as hide. So these are the only ones that you need to fill out when adding a new page. Now, if you do ever want to see them, you can just click on here and they will all reappear, but I'm just going to hide them on here. Then when you want to start a task, you'll click start task. It moves to in progress. When you want to finish the task, you click end task, and it will then move to the done tab. And as you can see, it will then tell you if you've completed the task on time or not. And that is the Timeboxing Notion setup all complete. If you want to be even more productive, then make sure you check out my Second Brain template, which is an advanced productivity system. It has tons of 5-star reviews from people that have used it. You can grab this template over on my store. I'll leave a link in the description box below.